Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're back in War Thunder and I thought I would make a video clarifying my points on the ME109Z. The reason for this is because there seem to be people confused about the Z itself, or at least confused by my position on it, and if you just disagree with it then that's completely fine. If you agree with it, that's completely fine, but I thought it was worth making clarifications on the points that I brought up. I've also done a little bullet point list, so yeah, it should be kind of easy to do. So the first thing to get out of the way, the majority of today I've been looking for any information on the BF109Z, and what I found is a loop. Now, what do I mean by a loop? Generally, when you look at specific aircraft, whether it's a Mustang or a Spitfire or even a variant of them or any other aircraft or vehicle, generally what will happen is you can go through multiple sources, multiple documents, and eventually it will lead you to an endpoint which is either an archive or some kind of historical context which makes sense. Now, when there are certain aircraft, such as the Ho-Ri or the what is the other example? The R2Y2. What happens is you have a look at this aircraft online, and what ends up happening is you go through loops. So what that means is you go to one article, that links you to the next article, that links you to the next article, and then that article links you back to the first one. So in effect, they're all confirming each other, even though none of them have produced any information. And that is pretty much what I'm seeing from the BF109Z. One of the major websites I normally go to when it comes to looking at BF109s is Cluser, I think is how you say it. I will leave a link in the description for you. But it's one of the best ones when looking at any of the BF109s because it is incredibly well sourced. As you can see just looking at the Z series section, there are multiple sources here. Which go through the different forms of what the Z came on, and links to different sites, and also links to different archives, generally depending on the vehicle itself. Now, first of all, when you may look at the Z series there, it says it's partly contradictory. The reason for this is because some of the sources that are used completely contradict each other when it comes to the variants which were supposed to be made, and also the fact even if the Z1 even exists, which is the one that we're getting in game. So because of that, I had a look at all the sources, and the sources generally were stuff like this, where there is no source on it, there is just a picture which could have been done by anybody we don't know about, apart from this down here, which is talking about, of course, the bomb, but the source is Die Deutsche Luftfahrt or Willy Messerschmitt, so supposedly Messerschmitt himself drew this. But this is different to the one we have in game, and also the one which was supposed to be built. This looks to me like the Z0. The reason for this is you have a look at the engines, and the engine, shape is of a Friedrich. It is not of a G. So for me, this is what the Z0 was supposed to look like, not what we have in game. And then you look at another source. It links to the German Wikipedia. Now this can be disregarded straight away because, well, there is no source for any of this. This is just somebody's opinion on what the aircraft was. Therefore, that can be disregarded. And then there is a few other sources. So there is 2 books which are sourced in pretty much everything when we look at this. The main one you will find on the BF109 Wikipedia page, and the other one you will find here and in other places. These are the 2 things that I've tracked down which may have any information on this machine. So what I'm going to do is I've already ordered a book, The Warplanes of the Third Reich by William Green, to see if what information it has in it, if there is any historical information, or if it's just well, I don't know, FUBAR, to be quite honest. So we'll have a look when it comes to it. It should be here in a few weeks. It cost me around about $20. I didn't buy it from this site. I bought it from an independent seller. So yeah, we'll have to see. The other book is this one, which is the Messerschmitt ME109, and it's by Robert Michulek, and it was published in 1997. This one is published in 1970. so it's a little bit earlier than this one, and we'll just have to have a look and see. If the other one confirms anything, then I'll probably pick this one up, but to me this one looks a lot more informal, so I'm basically banking on William Green to come through for me for some information. But as I said, whenever I look through any of these sources, first of all, they're all, if we look at the variants themselves, they're different to the one that we're getting in game. There is no mention of any of them with 430s, it's either 530s or 230s. There is no mention of them having this central area, which, the one in game does not have this central area that you see here, but on a lot of the sketches that I've seen, at least on the Z0, there was supposed to be this little area in the middle. So there is something fishy going on here with the Z1, and that is completely fine. If you're okay with a fictional machine, then you go right ahead. For me personally, I'm not, and we'll go through some reasons why. But that's where I'm starting from. The historical reality, for me, is the Z1, which I've had a look at, which can be easily described here. It was based on the G5 instead of the F4. The armament was to be 5 Mk108s. So, first of all, it says was to be, since it wasn't officially ever built, as you can even see here, projected production. So what we're sat in right now is a fictional version of an aircraft which may have been built. That is the most confident I can be in the optimistic side. This vehicle may have been built. It may have had the cannons that it's supposed to have, and may also be able to carry a 500 kilo. Now let's go back to reality and throw in a bit of skepticism. The Z-0 was never even... the Z-0 in its entirety, there is no pictures of it, there is no real information of it, apart from we know that it was based on some Friedrichs, and there are also some design drawings from Messerschmitt himself, including something like this, and also looking at stuff like this. So we know there was something there. We know that they took two Friedrichs, planted them together. The idea was to add more guns to them, so they would be much better at taking on stuff like the Allied bombers. Now, if you want to try and be a little bit optimistic about this, you say this existed and the story is true, that the factory that it was in was bombed out. So that is as optimistic as you can be with this thing. I have seen no historical data. I have seen any data on the machine. Only these few drawings which are supposed to be done by Willie himself. Now, that is the version that could get into the game, the Z-0. The Z-1, there is no information on at all, apart from what people seem to be saying, which seems to be based on nothing unless it's based on this one book, which is why the book is important to me. In any case, taking all of these factors involved, being as impartial as possible, what we have here is a plane which may have been built. Let's just say it was built. Let's say both versions were built, the Z-0 and the Z-1. Both of them were built. What we have an issue with now is that they were never flown. And we know for a fact that they were never flown because there is no flight data on these aircraft. There is absolutely nothing when it comes to the flight characteristics of these aircraft, and because of that, it is impossible to create a flight model on top of everything which will be even semi-realistic to what it may have been. This aircraft may have split apart on takeoff. Now, I understand a lot of you are going to look at the F-82 or other machines and say, well, those didn't split apart. I want you to go and look at the testing that was involved with the F-82 and anything similar to this kind of 109Z, experiment. It took a hell of a lot of times for the Americans to get it correct. And if I'm supposed to believe that the Z-0 and the Z-1 are the just original prototypes, I can tell you right now they would not have worked. Even from just a flying point of view, the center of mass is completely off. You don't also have two pilots if something goes wrong. In the F-82, you have the navigator and the pilot, On top of all of this, you have different, as I said, center of masses. Would the engines be able to hold up the weight? There's all of these interesting and wonderful things that you have to think about. It is not as simple as just taking two BF109s and slamming them together and just saying, well, it's going to perform like a BF109. It's much more technical than that when it comes to creating a flight model and also a damage model. You may also remember the F-82 for an incredibly long time in game was completely broken. It either didn't work properly with its engines not creating enough power. There was even a time where only one of the engines was creating any power at all. On top of this, the center of the machine did not exist. So what you could do is you could put it through trees. And through the trees, the F-82 would be able to glide, as long as you did it through the center. This meant there was a massive hole in the damage model. Now, I have no idea if that's even been fixed, but let's say it has been fixed. At least they have some kind of working idea where they can go from and add it to the 109Z. But still, it should not perform like an F-82 at all, because the F-82 was tested. It was changed in the prototype phase to be able to fit all of the issues that it had, and unfortunately the 109Z never ever did that. On top of it, there is something that I wasn't sure about in the dev blog. The Z will have 30mm in the nose of the two aircraft, not in any of the center fuselage. The center wing. That's where the fifth 30mm comes from. So the fifth 30mm was supposed to be in the middle of the two wings, in the middle of the two props, and it seems like Gaijin have decided to go for a bomb. It's not a bomb holder, but you know what I mean, a bomb bracket to hold a bomb. And that's fine, make it more useful in ground forces. But we're going from the historical point of view here, and I hope there I've made a case for why it worries me that a machine like this could get into game without really any pushback from the community. And I'm sure there is pushback out there. I know a lot of people are excited about this plane or indifferent. Me personally, I think it is a step in the wrong direction and away from War Thunder's core values. And I understand that a lot of people don't agree with the core values that I personally have with War Thunder, or what War Thunder used to be a few years ago. But War Thunder, when I started, was marketed as a historical sim game. And when I got involved with it, it was. It was a fun game. There wasn't anything that was really unhistorical. Basically everything was around the idea of realism, even to the point of realistic battles being called historical battles. Now, a lot of people back then may not be around today, or they may have moved on, or maybe there's a lot of people like me who have just seen it gradually change over time and have had to deal with the things which have been added, which they may disagree with. And for me, there have been definitely tipping points in the game. The R2Y2 is a big one. I still think it's an abomination. The Panther II and Tiger 105 follow suit. And also stuff like the whole reproduction, which has the circular issue that, as I said, the ME109Z does. So let's go ahead and go through some of the criticisms. We'll also go through some of the ideas and why the BF109Z is different to the rest of the vehicles which we have, which are in that state, which are pretty much the Panther II, Tiger 105, Ho reproduction, and R2Y2. There are a few others, but those are the main four in my opinion. So the first thing is, when we look at the Ho reproduction, the Panther II, the Tiger II 105, and also the R2Y2, the reason that Gaijin gave that these were added into the game was that they filled a gap. There was holes for these vehicles which needed to be filled in the tech tree, and you can kind of understand that. So the Tiger II 105, the Panther II, Germany at the time needed a higher tier machines which weren't stuff like the Mouse or the Leopard, because they were trying to still focus on a World War II, maybe 1946 model at the best. And then we started getting the additions of other things, and now they've talked about taking them out in favor of stuff like, well, we don't know what in favor of, but my guess is Leopard 1 prototypes, and hopefully something like an SP-1C. Now, with that said, the reason they added them in was to fill a gap. Even though they were unhistorical, they were required for balance reasons. The R2Y2, all three variants of it, are in exactly the same boat. There is no other ground attackers for Japan at that jet level. They just don't exist. The only thing you could do is add in other American jets, which would annoy a hell of a lot of people, since there already are two Sabres in the Japanese line. It's also an issue that the Japanese have in the ground forces, but this was kind of solved by the R2Y2. Now, the whole reproduction is in the same boat. At 7.0, the Japanese have a bunch of medium tanks, which are okay, to say the least. They're not great. They're basically just worse M46s and M47s, with the same general stock grind, so generally you don't see a lot of them about, because, well, they're not great to play unless they're fully upgraded. So there had to be some kind of tank destroyer there to try and be useful. So that's where the whole reproduction came from. If you look at any data, which is on the whole reproduction, the most you can get out of that machine when it comes to historicalness is that half a hull was made. No gun, no superstructure, just half a hull. Not even the engines. So, yeah, once again, it's another unhistorical vehicle, but the answer is, by Gaijin, it's put into the game because it fills a gap. What you may notice from all these vehicles is none of them are premium. And you can also make an argument that they do fill a gap. The BF109Z1, which is being added to the game, is a premium, and it does not fill a gap. So, therefore, by their own logic, it shouldn't be added to the game. Now, I personally am against unhistorical stuff being in the game. The reason for this I've made clear many times, but I will go through a few more reasons. But first of all, we'll talk about it not filling a gap. So around the BR that it's going to be, we know it's going to be rank 4, so we're looking around 4 to 5, or 4 to 5.7, depending on how they tune this thing. You already have the DO335s. The DO335s are heavy fighters. They get a really good airspawn in Air Realistic. They are insanely good at taking out bombers. They also have access to stuff like MK103s, which are useful against bombers, compared to the Mark 108, the MK108s on the Z. On top of this, you have decent fighters. The K4, the G10, G14, they're all fun. They're all interesting, they match up pretty well against what they face, and you just have to fly them correctly to be useful. You also have the Focke-Wulfs. The Focke-Wulfs were good energy fighters, but they decided to annihilate the elevators, and I would like to see them fixed. But there, you have two competent lines of fighters, you have a competent line of attackers / heavy fighters, and you also have a competent line of bombers, now with the HU-177. So, if somebody could explain to me which gap this thing is filling, I would be incredibly happy. Now, if it's just what some people have said is a money grab, which I don't think it is, but let's say it is, then fair enough. It would be nice if somebody could own up to it, and from Gaijin, and just say it is. But if this is designed with the intent purpose to filling a gap in the tree, first of all, it would not be premium, and second of all, there would be a clear and obvious gap, just like there was for the R2Y2 or the whole reproduction. So, when it comes to the arguments that Gaijin have made in the past to add in unhistorical vehicles, they do not fit the 109Z. There is no standard tech tree equivalent in the form of like the Hori prototype and the Hori production. There is no real need for it, to be quite honest. So my question is, why is it being added to the game, and is it a sign of things to come? Now, I've seen a lot of people use the fact that we have the Hori production, the Panther II, and all of these vehicles which are ahistorical to say that we should have the Z in-game. And I can't fault the logic, apart from what Gaijin have said themselves, that they're there to fill gaps. But they've kind of disproven the point with adding this in. So we're going to go through a few things when it comes to my thoughts on it. So I've already talked about the fact that the comparisons don't really make sense, but at least, you know, you can have a think about it. I cannot even confirm that the Friedrich existed. I just have pictures. When it comes to schematics, I have a few schematics, and that's it. And then we have the F1 version with the Gs. I just can't find anything on it. It doesn't fill a hole in the tree. Already said that. It doesn't have a tech tree equivalent, is an issue, and there is no historical data to go off. Okay, so this is the next big point in the whole thing. So one of the big things about War Thunder is the strength of the community. I know a lot of you may not believe it. A lot of people, especially myself, have talked about how divided the community is. But in a sense, that is a big strength. The reason for this is because you have tons of people interested in different things. So what you can do is you can create a melting pot of ideas, which people use with their imagination and be able to build from it. It's one of the great things about a lot of online communities, including War Thunder, where there isn't just one belief, there isn't just even two beliefs. There is many different beliefs from many different people. And because of this, it is great. It means that we just get a lot of really interesting and cool content. If you've ever been to the War Thunder forums and looking at, kind of the we should add this section, it's really cool. Like, there's a ton of really interesting ideas, and it's always nice to see. Now, on top of this, a sector of the community is very, very stingent about stuff like bug reports, stuff to improve the game in a more realistic way, and also just to try and fix either flight models, damage models, or stuff like tank models for the future. Now, the issue with this is if you start adding implants like this in a decent amount, there is no comparisons you can make. There is no historical data on the 109Z. It never flew, so we don't know what it's supposed to fly like. So at the end of the day, Gaijin can create a flight model and a damage model which is completely ahistorical to fit the game. Now, the mantra for me and for Gaijin, or at least it used to be, and for a lot of the players, was you get a historical vehicle, you make it historical, and then you fit it into the game. And you do this through matchmaking and also through repair cost. Now, the 109Z, you can't do that, because first of all, it's not historical in the sense of the word that we've talked about before. So with that said, let's say you believe the 109Z is overperforming. You do a ton of fact checks, you create this wonderful bug report, you even maybe say that one of the engines is outperforming the other one. What Gaijin can do is just turn their back and say, no matter what you say, you're wrong because you don't have the data on it. We've seen this with stuff like the whole reproduction. We've also seen this with some of the later tier tanks. The tanks in their entirety, well, not in their entirety, but a lot of the facts about the top tier tanks are either classified or ranged. And what I mean by ranged is if you go and read the article from update 1.75, they talked a lot about how all of the information is classified, but there's a lot of people who estimate ranges of either armor values or penetration values or engine values, and from there what they can do is they can basically work out where the vehicle can be and balance it by that. So if a vehicle has incredibly high range of armor, what they can do is pick a number out of that and try and balance the game around that, just kind of like how they did with the Challenger's armor. Now, the 109Z, there is no ranges, there is no idea of how this thing would fly. You could even make an argument where one of the engines is supposed to be half as powerful as the other one because of the airframe, and Gaijin could make the exact same argument. They could come up with complete tripe to try and cover this thing from criticism, depending on how it's actually flying in this game. They could easily make this a 6.0 aircraft, they could make it a super prop, and there'd be nothing you could say against it. Because there's nothing on your side apart from an opinion. And an opinion would not fly when you're talking about bug reports. You need hard facts to back it up. And if you don't believe me, go and look at the massive amount of bug reports on the Challenger and go and look at them on the whole reproduction. Both of them have been ignored because you can't produce the concrete facts that are required to be able to change the aircraft or the vehicles involved. So what you're going to end up is just get a massive wall in front of you, and this plane will be whatever Gaijin wants it to be. And since it's premium, there is always going to be the conversation about making it slightly better than it should have been. And obviously, we can never say this is true or not, because first of all, once again, it never flew. I want to really emphasize that point. And on top of it, bias is always going to think that is going to be talked about a lot when it comes to any of these decisions. So unfortunately, when it comes to bug reports and stuff, you're kind of out of luck with this machine, because no matter what you say, it can be thrown back in your face with no response, because they don't need to give one. This is the flight model they created, it is ahistorical, therefore this is how it's going to fly. You cannot bug report that, and you cannot do anything about it. The next point to talk about is much more of a minor one, but for me personally it does make a big difference. So I'm a big proponent of stuff like World War Mode, and also some of the events, so the War Thunder Chronicles events, or some of the historical ones. They've kind of disappeared over a time, but we still have some of them per year. The thing about the 109Z is obviously it never fought, so it can't be involved in those two areas of the game which I enjoy the most. So for me, it's a redundant aircraft when we look at World War Mode or the events. Now, as I said, I know this is a very minor point, but it is something to bring up nonetheless, just because it means in the grand scheme of things, it is only useful for random battles, and if we go into an era, which hopefully we do eventually, of this kind of World War Mode era, enduring confrontation era, the 109Z does not have a place, because it's not historical. The next point to bring up, let's see. Let's go through some of the criticisms. So I've been reading a lot of the comments in the BF109Z video, and a lot of them revolve around either the fact that it was produced, or comparing it to the R2Y2 Ho-Ri Panther 2 and stuff, and that's fine. I think I've gone through these earlier in the video. But there were some of them which, they're just kind of thrown out there. So I should just let it go and have paper or imaginary aircraft in the game. If people want that, like I know one of the big disagreements I have with Tiger Frost wants these types of aircraft, he wants the upgraded ME262s, and that's completely fine. If that's your opinion on it, then that's great. The issue with it is it destroys my interest in War Thunder. And since this is my channel, and it's my opinion, I will talk from my interest and not the community's, because I can't speak for a community, I cannot speak for other people. If people want to come on and discuss it, then they're more than welcome to. But the issue for me personally is once you start adding them in, the interest for me in War Thunder is gone. I started playing War Thunder because it was historical. I started playing War Thunder because it was a World War II based flight sim which I had never seen on the scale that we have right now, or even before. Even when I started playing nearly 5 years ago now, the machine, or the amount of vehicles that was in War Thunder was so much more than everywhere else, and it meant that I could play some weird, obscure aircraft, which maybe it was just a prototype that flew, but I could fly it in War Thunder, compared to, in another game where I'd just be stuck playing one BF109, and that's it, when it came to the aircraft in it. So because of that, yes, it would be nice to stick to historical for that reason, just because in my head, that's what I personally want to play. If people want to start adding in paper or imaginary aircraft as well, the best thing that War Thunder Gaijin could do is just, as I said before, just get rid of their bug report part of the forum, because you won't be able to argue against it. Sorry about that. And they could also just do some ridiculous things when it comes to a certain aircraft. As I've gone through before, some designs of Willie Messerschmitt, some designs from the British even. I will go through some of them later on, and then a completely obscure one. Think about even like the KV6, right? What's the argument against the KV6 then? Or the E5? The E5 is a good one to bring up. Or the E50M. And at that point, I mean, we already have a game that does that stuff. And then the next criticism is it's just a game, bro. Yeah, that's fine. You don't have to listen. You don't have to get worked up about things. You don't have to be emotional, but there are things that people are passionate about. I personally am very passionate about my work. I'm passionate about science. I'm passionate about the research that I've done. I'm passionate about being able to be confident while I speak. I'm passionate about my marriage. I'm passionate about my friends, my family, and all of these things. And I'm also passionate about War Thunder, because it's a game which I've had a hell of a lot of enjoyment out of over the last 5 years. And if you just think it's a game, then that's fine. I also just think it's a game, but I also like talking about it. And I will keep talking about it. I will keep having, I will just have my own opinions. And if you don't want to listen to them, that's fine. If you want a much more casual look at the game, there are many other channels out there that give that. Here, we don't do that. We look at historical data. We look at very complex theories. We look at parts of the game which you may not be interested in, such as like the introduction to War Thunder. There's been a lot of comments on those videos basically saying, well, yeah, this is obvious. Well, not to a new player. Or, oh, this is too long. Well, unfortunately, there's a lot of minutiae in War Thunder. And this is just how I'm going to run the channel. These are the videos I'm going to make, and if you don't like them, that's fine. If you do like them, that's also fine. It's a free market here on YouTube, or at least the majority of it is. So if you want to go and watch another creator, go ahead and do it. The game does not have realism. Now, this is an interesting point, and it was brought up several times. And the question is, where do you draw the line? Now, for me, I draw the line for vehicles which have absolutely no data on them. There are many vehicles out there which I would personally not like to have in the game because we have no sources for them. When it comes to game modes, a lot of people say, well, there's domination points. You didn't have domination points in World War II. There are random bases over the place with health bars. You didn't have them in World War II either. But those are game mechanics. And if you can't see the difference between game mechanics and models in the game, then that's fine. If you want to conflate them, you go ahead. But for me, the idea of the game mechanics is to make the game fun, and the idea of the models is to make it realistic and historical. They are two different parts of the game. So when we discuss both of them together, the water gets incredibly muddy and is just a pointless conversation overall. But the game does have realism. It has realism in many ways. Otherwise, they would not bug fix flight models, or they would not fix tanks' damage models. They wouldn't bother. Because why? Why would they? For balance? Well, most of the changes that they make are historical changes. And then when it comes to the minutiae, it's pretty much bug fixing when it comes to specific models, such as getting rid of certain weak spots on the M60's turret and everything like that. But if you want to look from a realistic point of view, they do strive for it in a lot of the vehicles that they've seen. And yes, we've had creeping over time ideas which are unhistorical, and if they want to go down that route, that's fine. But overall, yes, the game is realistic, especially if you play realistic and simulator. Those are what those game modes are designed for. And with World War mode coming, we're going to see another area which is going to be based around historic stuff. And I'm interested in that. I'm sorry for being interested in historical stuff. I read history books. I don't know. Like, if you just want a game to be a game, there are plenty of other games out there like War Thunder. I know a lot of people don't want to believe it, but, you got World of Tanks. That's not realistic either, according to, people's definitions. Why not go play that? It's a solid tank game, and it'll have every vehicle under the sun. World of Warplanes. How about that? Oh, there's not enough vehicles in it. It's not my issue. You're talking about realism. But overall, yeah. Instead of blathering on about random stuff, the main point to take away from this video is, if you do have any proper sources on any of the BF109Zs, which are not just circular links, please let me know so I can see them. On top of this, yes, I understand the comparisons, I don't think they fit, and all of the other issues, I hope I've explained myself clearly. I hope you all... Oh, and on top of this, the Q&A that I'm going to be doing, I did a video about a week ago saying, what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the Q&A, and a lot of people put their questions in, which is lovely, so either tomorrow or the next day I'm going to be recording it. So if you want to drop in some questions, or if you have any things you want me to answer, please go to that video and pop them in there. I'm not going to do it on Discord this time, because there's already a ton of questions, and the last time I did it, it was 1 hour and 40 long, so yeah, we'll have to see. But anyway, hopefully the dev server comes out soon so we can have a look at these vehicles, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time.